Welcome to the History Buffs podcast, the show where we dive deep into the most fascinating stories from our past. I'm your host, Tom Aab.
And I'm Pam. And today, Tom, we have an absolutely epic tale. We're talking about a name that has echoed through millennia as a symbol of defiance and the fight for freedom.
That's right. We are talking about the man, the legend, Spartacus. His story is more than just a rebellion. It's the story of how one man, an enslaved gladiator, managed to challenge the most powerful republic the world had ever known.
Exactly. This isn't just a story about battles and strategy, though there's plenty of that. It's about what drives people to risk everything for a chance at liberty. So where does this incredible story even begin? Who was Spartacus before he was a household name?
Well, that's one of the most intriguing parts. The historical record is surprisingly thin on his early life. We know he was a Thracian from a region that is modern-day Bulgaria. The Roman historians Appian and Plutarch are our main sources, and they tell us he was a formidable man, not just in strength, but in intellect and character.
So he wasn't just a brute, which is often the stereotype for gladiators.
Not at all. They described him as more Greek in his thinking, implying he was cultured and strategic. One popular theory is that he once served as an auxiliary soldier in the Roman army.
Oh, wow. So he would have known their tactics, their strengths and weaknesses from the inside?
Precisely. And that knowledge would become absolutely critical. But somehow, whether he deserted or was captured, his path took a dark turn. He was sold into slavery.
And that's how he ends up at the place that ignites the whole fire, the gladiator school.
Exactly. The school, or ludus, in Capua, owned by a man named Lentulus Batiatus. And let's be clear, this was a brutal existence. Gladiators were property, trained to kill for public entertainment. They were investments, but their lives were cheap.
You can just imagine the tension, the despair, the simmering rage in a place like that. It must have been a powder keg. So how did it finally explode?
It exploded in 73 BC. Spartacus and around 70 other gladiators decided they had had enough. Their plot was discovered, but they chose to fight their way out rather than be captured and executed. And you won't believe what their initial weapons were.
Let me guess. Not swords and shields.
Not even close. They grabbed what they could from the kitchens: knives, cleavers, cooking spits. With these improvised weapons, they fought their way past their guards, escaped the school, and armed themselves with proper gladiatorial equipment they found on a wagon.
That is absolutely incredible. A rebellion that started with kitchen utensils. So they're free, but they're deep in Roman territory. What's their next move?
They did something smart. They found a defensible position. They fled to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, near modern-day Naples. From there, word of their escape spread like wildfire. Soon, they weren't just 70 gladiators anymore. Other escaped slaves, poor farmhands, and outcasts from the countryside began to flock to their banner.
So it became a real movement. How did Rome react? I imagine they wouldn't take this lightly.
That's the fascinating part. They underestimated him, terribly. Rome had dealt with slave revolts before, and they saw this as just another minor nuisance, a problem for the local authorities, not the mighty legions.
A classic case of hubris.
Exactly. They sent a praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber with a hastily assembled militia of about 3,000 men. Not a professional legion, just a police force, really. Glaber didn't even bother building a proper fortified camp. He simply blocked the only known path down the mountain, planning to starve the rebels out.
And this is where we see the first real flash of Spartacus's genius, right?
Absolutely. This is the stuff of legend. The side of the mountain Glaber had ignored was a sheer cliff face, covered in wild vines. Spartacus had his men cut the vines and weave them into long, sturdy ladders.
No way. You're telling me they rappelled down a cliff?
That's exactly what they did. Under the cover of darkness, they descended the cliff, circled around the base of Vesuvius, and attacked the Roman camp from the rear. Glaber's men were caught completely by surprise. It was a total rout.
Wow. That's a scene straight out of a movie. With that victory and all the Roman weapons they captured, they were no longer just a band of fugitives. They were an army.
An army that was growing every day. This victory was the best recruiting poster they could have asked for. Now Rome had to take them seriously. They sent another force under the praetor Publius Varinius. Spartacus and his commanders, including men like Crixus and Oenomaus, didn't just defeat Verinius, they humiliated him, capturing his attendants and even his horse.
So their numbers are swelling. How big are we talking at this point?
Sources vary, but it's estimated his army grew to as many as 70,000 people. Think about that. Men, women, children, a mobile nation of the dispossessed. They spent the winter of 73 BC training, forging weapons, and turning this raw mass of people into a somewhat cohesive fighting force.
Which brings up a huge question. What was the ultimate goal? Were they trying to overthrow Rome? Were they just trying to escape?
That was the critical point of contention within the rebellion itself. It seems Spartacus's main goal was to march his people north, cross the Alps, and get them back to their homelands, to Gaul and Thrace, where they could be free.
That sounds like a logical plan. A path to freedom.
It was, but many of his followers, particularly a large contingent under his second-in-command, Crixus, had other ideas. They had tasted victory. They had tasted plunder. They wanted revenge on Rome and to continue looting Italy. This disagreement led to the army splitting.
Oh, that's tragic. Divided, they'd be so much more vulnerable.
It was a fatal mistake. Crixus and about 30,000 of his followers were cornered and defeated by a Roman army. But here's what's truly remarkable. In the spring of 72 BC, the Roman Senate, now in a full-blown panic, dispatched both of its consuls for the year, each with 2 legions.
So this is the A-Team, Rome's premier military and political leaders.
The absolute top brass. And Spartacus, with his remaining forces, defeated both of them in separate battles. He maneuvered his army with incredible speed and skill, completely out-generaling the Roman commanders. He was now at the peak of his power, marching north, the path to the Alps wide open.
So he could have escaped. He could have achieved his goal right then.
He could have. And for reasons historians still debate to this day, he turned back. He marched his army south again. Maybe his followers refused to leave the riches of Italy. Maybe he thought he could bargain with Rome, or even march on the city itself. Whatever the reason, it was the turning point of the war.
Because now Rome was truly terrified, humiliated, and when Rome gets terrified, it gets ruthless.
Precisely. The Senate, desperate, turned to one man, Marcus Licinius Crassus.
Crassus, I know that name. He was part of the first triumvirate with Caesar and Pompey, wasn't he? And known for being unbelievably wealthy.
The wealthiest man in Rome. He made his fortune in some rather shady ways, but what mattered was that he had resources. He raised 6 new legions, combined them with the remnants of the consular armies, and took command of a force of nearly 50,000 professional soldiers.
And he wasn't like the other commanders, was he? He was a different breed.
He was utterly ruthless. When one of his lieutenants engaged Spartacus against orders and was defeated, Crassus knew he had to restore discipline. So he revived an ancient, brutal form of punishment, decimation.
I've heard of this. It's horrifying. Explain what that is.
He took the cohort that had retreated, divided them into groups of 10, and forced them to draw lots. The one unlucky soldier in each group was then beaten to death by the other 9.
By his own comrades. That's just unimaginable.
It was a terrifying message. Crassus was telling his men that he was more dangerous to them than the enemy was. And it worked. His legions became disciplined and effective. He pursued Spartacus south, pinning him in the toe of Italy.
And he didn't just chase him, he trapped him.
In an incredible feat of engineering, Crassus had his legions build a wall nearly 50 kilometers long, complete with a ditch right across the peninsula of Calabria, trapping Spartacus and his army against the sea.
So Spartacus, the great escape artist, was finally caged. What was his plan?
He tried to make a deal with Cilician pirates to transport his army to Sicily, hoping to reignite the slave revolts there. But the pirates took his money and sailed away, abandoning him.
Betrayed, trapped by land and by sea. This feels like the end of the road.
It seemed like it, but Spartacus had one last brilliant move. On a stormy winter night, he had his forces fill a section of the Roman ditch with earth, wood, and even the bodies of prisoners and cattle, creating a bridge. Under the cover of the storm, a large part of his army slipped through the fortifications.
He broke through the unbreakable wall? The man was a genius until the very end.
He was, But his luck was running out. His army was fractured and starving. Crassus was closing in. And to make matters worse, another Roman general, the famous Pompey the Great, was returning from Spain with his legions, ready to trap Spartacus from the north. The net was closing.
So he was forced into one final, decisive battle.
Yes, in 71 BC, near the Sila River in southern Italy. Knowing this was the end, Spartacus prepared for his last stand. The historian Plutarch gives us a powerful image from that day. Just before the battle, someone brought Spartacus his horse. He drew his sword, killed it, and said, "If I am victorious, I will have many horses. If I am defeated, I will not need one."
Wow. No retreat, no surrender. He was fighting on foot with his men.
Exactly. The battle was a brutal, desperate affair. The slave army was overwhelmed by the disciplined legions. Spartacus himself fought with incredible bravery, cutting his way through soldiers and the wounded, trying to get to Crassus himself. He was wounded in the leg by a spear, forced to fight on one knee, but he never stopped until he was finally surrounded and cut down.
And his body was never found, was it?
Never. Lost in the chaos and carnage of the battlefield. The rebellion was crushed.
And what happened to the survivors? I have a feeling Rome wanted to make an example of them.
A horrific one. Crassus captured around 6,000 survivors. To send a message to every slave in the Republic, he had them all crucified. Their crosses lined the Appian Way, the main road from Capua to Rome, for over 120 miles.
A truly barbaric end to the story. And didn't Pompey, who barely fought in the war, try to steal the credit from Crassus?
He did. Pompey's legions mopped up a few thousand fugitives who had escaped the final battle, and he wrote to the Senate saying, "Crassus defeated the slaves in open battle, but I have torn the war out by its roots." It fueled a bitter rivalry between the two men for years.
So, when we look back, what is the ultimate legacy of Spartacus? He lost, his followers were killed, and slavery in Rome continued for centuries.
It's true, he didn't end slavery, but he did something else. He put the fear of God into the Roman elite. They never forgot how close they came to utter chaos brought on by the people they considered their property. But more than that, his story transformed over time.
Right. He became a symbol. From Karl Marx to revolutionary movements throughout history, his name has been an inspiration for anyone fighting against oppression. He's proof that even in the most hopeless circumstances, the desire for freedom can inspire people to do the impossible.
He lost the war, but in a way, he won the story. The names of the consuls he defeated are footnotes in history books, but everyone knows the name Spartacus.
A powerful legacy indeed. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey back to ancient Rome.
Join us next time on the History Buffs podcast, where we'll be exploring the life of one of history's most brilliant and controversial queens, Cleopatra. Until then, stay curious.